Hello dear student. In the previous classes, I have started about a new topic that is autogoid, and in first class of autogoid I have discussed about what are autogoids, what are the simple examples of autogoid, and about their secretion place or secretion site and one to physiological action. Then I individually started all that autogoid individually. First I have covered about the autogoid, that is histamine, that I have already discussed into the previous video. So go and check it out before today's session. Today we are going to discuss about another important autocoids that is also very important for our body, that is prostaglandin. In our pharmacy syllabus, generally autocoids are very common question they generally ask. They generally ask in question what is autocoid with the introduction, example, etc. And with that one question, they generally ask either write about all the details about histamine as a autocoid, either they generally ask in question histamine, or they ask only write about the details about autocoid prostaglandin. So histamine and prostaglandin, that two are most important for our pharmacy exams. So in previous class I have already discussed about histamine, so go and check it out. That is also very important topic that I have already covered. That links will be given into the below in the description. There you can check the histamine topic that I have already covered. So let's go to the video of today's topic. Today we are going to discuss about another autocat, that is prostaglandin. Let's start the video. So at first we have to know what is prostaglandin. In that all session, to understand or to indicate prostaglandin, I will use a short term, that is PGS or prostaglandins, as that prostaglandin is consist of so many classes or types or analogs, so they are combinedly called as prostaglandin. It is not very comfortable to write that whole name when I will go and to describe that. So to shortly I will write it as PGS or prostaglandins. So first what we have to know, first we have to study about what is prostaglandin. So I have already told you in previous class that there are different type of autocoids which are local hormones and act into our body in different physiological and functional action. Here prostaglandin also is one type of autocoid. In previous class I have studied about histamine, that was amino derived. In video of autocoid only I have described autocoid can be amino derivative or lipid derived, or it can be fat derived. So yesterday or last class we have discussed about histamine, which was the analog derived from amino acid or amines. Today we will going to discuss about prostaglandin, that is autocoid, which is generally lipid derived. So autocoid is a lipid derived autocoid. So prostaglandin is a example of lipid derived autocoids. Now what is the definition of prostaglandin? Prostaglandin is a lipid derived autocoids that generally is a biological active derivative which is consist of 20 carbon atoms of fatty acid, and it is generally released from membrane phospholipid. So from here only you can understand that is derived from fatty acid, so that is lipid derived autocoid. So what is prostaglandin? Prostaglandin is a biologically active derived of lipid derived autocoid that is generally consist of 20 carbon atoms, and it is consist of different chain of fatty acid with 20 carbon atoms, and they generally released from membrane phospholipids. That's why, so as it is released from a phospholipid and it is also consists of some fatty acid and 20 carbon atom, so it is a lipid derived autocoid. And generally the prostaglandin is secreted from the prostate gland. So what prostaglandin generally release mostly from prostate gland. As the prostaglandin is, it is generally secreted by the whole cells what are present in our body, including stomach, kidney, liver, etc. All release prostaglandin. Generally, most of the prostaglandin it is secreted from the prostate gland. That's why that autocoid is named as prostaglandins. So the from the name only you can understand prostaglandins, because it is most of the secreted from the prostate gland. That's why prostaglandin is called as prostaglandin, because it is derived from prostaglandin and most of them are secreted from that part. That's why that is prostaglandin. Now it was the simple introduction about prostaglandin. Now we will get into the deep of the prostaglandin, where we will decide or we will discuss about the different mechanism of release, how that prostaglandin is generally released from any cell or any gland, what are the types, what are the classification of prostaglandin. Then we will study about the physiological action of prostaglandin in our body. Then we will discuss about the different analogs or drugs which is generally act as prostaglandin analogs. Then we will discuss about their therapeutic usage, and at last we will discuss about the adverse effects of all that prostaglandin analog drugs. So now let's go into the next slide. So the next is, you just remember there are different types of prostaglandin that I am going to discuss when I will tell you about the different analogs or different drugs. That time I will tell you the clear classification of prostaglandin, but for now you just remember prostaglandin are generally two types. One is PGE2 and second one is PGF2, and except that PGE2 and PGF2 they are different analogs or different classifications or subclass are also there, that I am going to discuss into the next slide when I am going to discuss about the analogs of prostaglandin. So before going into that physiological action and different drugs that act against or act for prostaglandin, we have to decide about the biosynthesis, about the biosynthesis of prostaglandin. So how that prostaglandin is generally secreted from or generated from or synthesized from our body, that we have to discuss in that slide. I have told you in the introduction part only, prostaglandin is consist of 20 carbon atom and it is released from the phospholipids, and it also consists of a chain of fatty acid. So that from that introduction only you can understand how that biosynthesis generally takes place for prostaglandin. What generally happens? Generally there are different fatty acids which are present in our body. With that, generally 20 types of carbon atom, including that fatty acids, they generally go and attach with each other, and then they are going to release from the cell membrane phospholipid, or they will bind with that cell membrane phospholipid, and after binding with the cell membrane phospholipid and fatty acid, it will convert into the arachidonic acid. After that formation of arachidonic acid, when it will come with the combination or in the presence of cyclooxygenase, that arachidonic acid will convert it into the prostaglandin. So how that prostaglandin biosynthesis generally work as 20 carbon atom including fatty acid, it will bind with each other, then it will shift into the cell membrane, where it will bind with the cell membrane phospholipid. After binding with the phospholipid and 20 carbon of fatty acid, it become converted into the arachidonic acid. That arachidonic acid, in presence of carbo or cyclooxygenase enzyme, it arachidonic acid generally converted into the PGS or prostaglandin in the different types of their E2, F2, F2 alpha, I2, D2, that I am going to discuss when I will tell about the analog. So this is the simple biosynthesis of prostaglandin. Fatty acid with 20 carbon atom, it will go to cell membrane and bind with the cell membrane phospholipid, and for that it will converted into the arachidonic acid. That arachidonic acid, in presence of cyclooxygenase enzyme, arachidonic acid will converted into the PGS or prostaglandin. So that was the simple way of biosynthesis prostaglandin, how that prostaglandin generally synthesized into our body. Now we are going to discuss about the different physiological actions. So prostaglandin, I have told you, histamine and prostaglandin, that two are very important for the pharmacy, because in our body most of the work that was done by that generally done by autophagy, most of almost 90% work generally covered by done by prostaglandin and histamine. So that two are very important. Today we are going to discuss in that slide about the physiological action that is done by prostaglandin into our different system of our body, including CVS, CNS, respiratory, kidney, endocrine system, our ocular or eye system, then the renal system. In all that we will study about the specific action of prostaglandin through that specific site of our different system. So first we will discuss about the physiological action of prostaglandin in cardiovascular system. In cardiovascular system, it generally act as vasodilator. It generally act as vasodilator. Whether it is E2 or whether it is F2, that both generally act as potent vasodilator, and they are very active than acetylcholine also and histamine also. That means in CVS or cardiovascular system, prostaglandin, that can be E2 or F2, that generally act as vasodilator, and that is more potent vasodilating agent than the normal acetylcholine or histamine in our body. So that prostaglandin is a very potent vasodilation, more than also acetylcholine and histamine. Next, second one we will discuss about the action of prostaglandin in blood. In blood, what it will do, it will generally decrease the blood pressure. It can be E2 or it can be F2, both generally decrease the blood pressure. Then there also decreases or inhibit platelet aggregation. So in CVS, it generally acts as a potent vasodilator. It can be E2 or F2, and it is more potent than acetylcholine and histamine. In blood, it generally decreases the blood pressure and inhibit the platelet secretion. Now we will discuss about the role of prostaglandin in respiratory system. In prostaglandin, I have told you different analogs are there that I will go to discuss into the next slide. But here you just remember in prostaglandin what is the role in that respiratory system, especially the type of prostaglandin F2 alpha and prostaglandin D2. It generally act as bronchoconstrictor. And the E2, PGE2, it generally acts as bronchodilator. So in previous I saw that both E2 F2 they did same work, vasodilator to vasodilator. Then in blood pressure they are decreasing blood pressure, so they will decrease blood pressure and they will decrease the or inhibit the blood or platelet aggregation. But in case of respiratory system, generally prostaglandin F2 alpha and D2 they generally act as protein bronchoconstrictor, and PGE2 of prostaglandin generally act as bronchodilator. Now we'll go to discuss about the role of prostaglandin in GIT. How that prostaglandin act in GIT? It generally increases the gastrointestinal motility. So in GIT, what PG or prostaglandin will do? It will induce or increases the gastrointestinal motility. Then we'll discuss about the action of prostaglandin in renal or kidney. In renal or kidney, what it will do? In general, E2 and I2, it will increase the release of or excretion of water, sodium ion and potassium ion. So in renal, what that prostaglandin will do? That prostaglandin E2 and I2, it will generally increase the retention or secretion of water, sodium ion and potassium ion. Now we'll discuss about the role of prostaglandin in endocrine system. In endocrine system, how that prostaglandin is generally act, it generally helps in inducing of secretion of different pituitary hormone like growth hormone, then adrenocorticotropic hormone, luteinizing hormone, prolactin, etc. So what the role of prostaglandin in endocrine system? It generally induce or increase the secretion of different pituitary hormone like growth hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone, luteinizing hormone and the release of prolactin from the endocrine system. Then at last we will discuss about the role of prostaglandin in ocular system or in eye. In eye, how that PES or prostaglandin generally act? Here generally prostaglandin F2 alpha generally increases the ocular inflammation and decreases intraocular tension. So in eye, what that prostaglandin will do? In eye, that prostaglandin will increases the ocular inflammation and it will reduce the intraocular tension. So by that I finish off the physiological action of prostaglandin in the different system of our body. It was included in cardiovascular system, blood system, respiratory system, gastrointestinal system, kidney or renal system, and endocrine gland system. And at last we have discussed about the physiological action of prostaglandin on our eye or in ocular system. Now I am going to discuss about the different analog or different classification of prostaglandin with the example of analogs. So now we will discuss about the prostaglandin analogs. So what are the prostaglandin analogs? In case of খুলোনি না, খুলোনি বন্ধ আছে। So now we'll discuss about the different analogs or the drugs that can be replaced as prostaglandin with their classification and the example. So what are the analogs? In case of prostaglandin E1 analog, the exam is misoprostol. Then in case of I2, the example is ipoprostol. Then in case of F2 alpha, the example of analog is carboplast. In case of E2 analog, the example is dinoprostol. So what are the analogs or drugs that can be used as the alternative of prostaglandin? In case of E1 analog, example is misoprostol. In case of PGI2, the analog is ipoprostol. In case of F2 alpha, the derivative is carboplast. In case of E2 analog, the analogs is dinoprostol. So these are the classification of different analogs used in case of prostaglandin E2, I2, F2 alpha and E2. Now we'll discuss about the different therapeutic usage of prostaglandin. That means the different usage in pharmacy field or medical field. They are generally prostaglandin, that analogs that I have already discussed, that are generally used in medical field, that I have already written here. The therapeutic usage are that prostaglandin is used during labor pain, that prostaglandin also used in case of induction of abortion, that prostaglandin also helps in controlling post-mortem hemorrhage, and that prostaglandin also used in treatment of NSAIDs induced peptic ulcer, and 5, it is also used to treat erectile dysfunction, and it also used to treat glaucoma. So that were the therapeutic usage of prostaglandin in medical field. What are they? They are during labor pain or during induction of abortion. They are also used to control post-mortem hemorrhage. Then it is also used to treat NSAIDs induced peptic ulcer, and it is also used to treat erectile dysfunction and glaucoma. So that were the normal therapeutic usage of prostaglandin in medical field. Now we'll discuss about the different adverse drug reaction of all that prostaglandin analogs. What are the general toxic, unwanted or undesirable action in case of prolonged action or prolonged use of prostaglandin analog? Those are fever, diarrhea, abdominal cramp, headache, nausea, vomiting. So these are the toxic, unwanted, undesirable adverse drug reaction due to the overuse or excess or prolonged use of prostaglandin analog, that are fever, diarrhea, abdominal cramp, headache, nausea, vomiting, etc. So by that I have finished off the prostaglandin chapter. So in today's class I have discussed about the introduction of prostaglandin, where I told you that is 20 atom phosphoacid released from fatty acid and membrane phospholipid. This is generally lipid derived autocoid. Then I have discussed about the almost or most of the prostaglandin secreted from prostate gland, that's why that is called as prostaglandin. The type are E2 and F2, and release how it is: fatty acid, then 20 carbon atom, then cell membrane phospholipid. It induce or produce arachidonic acid. That arachidonic acid in presence of cyclooxygenase converted into the prostaglandin. Then I have discussed about the physiological action of prostaglandin in our defense system, in case of cardiovascular system, in case of blood, in case of uterus, in case of respiratory system, GIT system, renal system or kidney, then endocrine system, and at last we have discussed about the physiological action of prostaglandin in our eye or ocular system. Then we have discussed about the different analogs of prostaglandin. It was in E1 analogs, then I2 analogs, F2 alpha analogs, and F2 and E2 analogs. Then we have discussed about the different therapeutic effect of prostaglandin, that includes use of prostaglandin during labor pain, due to induce of abortion. Then it can be also used to treatment of glaucoma and erectile dysfunction. Then prostaglandin also can be used to control post-mortem hemorrhage. That prostaglandin also can be used into the prophylaxis of NSAIDs induced peptic ulcer. And at last we have discussed about the toxic adverse effect of prostaglandin analog due to their overuse or prolonged use, that were include fever, diarrhea, abdominal pain, headache, nausea, vomiting, etc. So by that I have finished of the prostaglandin chapter. Please go through the prostaglandin. Before that, go through histamine and then go through prostaglandin to better understand about the concept of autocoid. That both videos link of autocoids and the introduction of autocoids and histamine are given into the below. Please go and check it out and ask me whatever doubt are there into the comment section. I will try to solve all this problem. Thank you.